see you guys in the dark.
A few years ago, I had to travel to another town alone. When I arrived, I checked myself in the hotel and went on my business. Later in the evening, I was free. Being in a place I visit for the first time, I decided to look around. Maybe shop a little bit. Staying in the hotel room seemed so boring. I went to a mall, and since I had nothing better to do, I decided to see a movie at the cinema there. I checked what movies they show at the time, and chose one which starts at about half an hour. After I bought a ticket, I had to kill the time, so I took an ice cream and sat at a table in a common place. At one of the other tables was sitting a guy. I didn't pay attention to him and went on eating my ice cream. Suddenly, this guy starts talking to me. It was something about my beautiful eyes. I thanked him and continued on my business. He offered me to join him at his table, but I politely refused him. I thought the conversation was over, but it seemed like he has nowhere near such thought. He continued talking to me like we were old friends. I tried to ignore him at first, but I felt it's not right, and I should be more polite. Big mistake on my part. He started asking me all kinds of questions, and I was dumb enough to answer him. I told him that I was not from here. He said he's also just visiting this town. He said he saw me looking at the movie posters and asked me what movie I was going to watch. Of course, silly me, I told him. I didn't really think it would do any harm. Soon enough, his questions started to bother me more and more. I finished my ice cream as fast as I could and made some excuse and left. There was still a lot of time until the movie starts, so I decided to linger in the shops, hoping that the guy will finish his meal and leave before I get back. When I returned, there was no trace of him. I was relieved. I went in front of the cinema, waiting the last couple of minutes before they opened the entrance. Just when they opened and people started getting in, guess who came out of nowhere? This guy. He immediately attached himself to me and started talking casually about the movie we were about to watch. I was already extremely uncomfortable, but I cannot forbid someone to watch a movie. Technically, he didn't do anything wrong, even if he clearly bought the ticket just because I told him I'm going to watch it. We entered, him following me, and I started looking for my seat, eager to get rid of him. Then he said something that made me shiver. He casually pointed towards a row and said, "There are our seats." My seat number was exactly where he was showing me. I never mentioned it to him. He not only bought the ticket for the same movie, but he also asked which one was my seat and took the adjacent seat. I have no idea why the cashier would give that information. Maybe he lied to her that that's my friend or even my boyfriend. I froze at the beginning of the row and calmly said, "Go ahead." He continued towards the seats, but I didn't follow him. I sat right there, at the very last seat of the row, close to the exit. There were not many people in the cinema, so there was a small chance that I took someone else's place. Luckily, he didn't move. Maybe he finally realized that it's not going to happen. At the end of the movie, I bolted out, scared that he might follow me. I haven't seen him ever since then. Just for context, my boyfriend and I are homeless, and we live in our car. There is a road that leads to a quiet beach on the bay near some train tracks, and there's only one road to exit, so not a lot of people come down this way, unless it's for beach access. People going to work in the industrial plants on the road, going to an AA meeting, or if they were sleeping in their cars as well. Nothing in the area was open except maybe a couple of bars, and even those were a good 3 to 4 blocks away. Most of the stretch of the road was 8-hour parking signs, so there were usually at least a few other people camped for the night, most of whom we have seen before, but tonight there weren't as many. Just a few vehicles taking advantage of the overnight parking. We parked a little further up the road than we normally do, hoping to get a better internet connection. It was a little after 12:30 a.m., and we were just relaxing, watching YouTube with the dog, starting to get sleepy when we heard a car pull up behind us with their lights off. We cover our windows so no one can see in, but we can peek out if we move the blanket, and we can see headlights from cars passing or approaching. My boyfriend said it was a van. We didn't think much of it and kept trying to watch our show, annoyed with the spotty Wi-Fi connection. There was a few words exchanged on what sounded like was the other side of the street, not behind us where the van pulled up. It then sounded like there were 3 or 4 people. A little bit later, the van drove off. Then we heard a knock on my side of the window. We shut off the volume on the laptop and called out, "Yeah?" There was silence. So we called out, "Can we help you?" But again, there was nothing. It was then that I realized my door was unlocked, so I quickly locked it. After about 30 seconds of quiet, I pulled open the cover and no one was there. Whatever. There are sometimes bums walking around. They could have thought we were someone else. It was silent for a while. Then we could see in the light of the street lamp, through the crack of the sun reflector covering the front windshield, the silhouette of someone walking around the front of the car, very slowly. It was another solid minute after we saw the movement before we heard a quieter tapping on the passenger side window. This time, my boyfriend pulled the cover down almost right away, and again, we didn't see who it was. Right after this, there was a knock on my side again. It was right about then we realized that there was still more than one person around the car. There was no time for one person to get away from the passenger side to the other side between the second and third knock, and we had heard more than one voice prior. I started to think that maybe not everyone had gotten back inside the van before it drove off. So after the third knock, I pulled my window cover down, almost all the way, super annoyed and on edge by now. There was a skinny white male, probably in his mid-30s to early 40s, holding a flashlight and something else scooped awkwardly in the other hand, almost like he was keeping it under his sweater, but we couldn't make it out. The windows were steamed up from us breathing inside with the windows shut tight, so it was really difficult to see out. He said, "Hey, I need a jump." Interesting, since there are no stores nearby. No reason to be down here at 1 a.m. We said, "We are sorry. We were just about to take off. We're in a rush." He got frustrated and whined, "Come on, I've been down here for hours." Okay, if we had been down here for hours, why did he not ask us to help him out about 45 minutes prior when we pulled up, parked, let our dog out to eat, go to the bathroom, etc., and get our bed set up? Or attempt to start the car at any point. We never heard a motor rev up, an attempt to turn the engine, or even the jingling of keys. Another reason this thing creeped me out is I could only see him. He said I need a jump. I've been down here for hours, when I could clearly hear that there were more than one person around, and we couldn't see them at all. For one reason or another, they were standing out of view, not making themselves known. After this, he grumbled and went across the street to a white car with black rims that we had seen before, but not associated with. I got this awful feeling in my gut, and even though all the windows were steamed up, I started the car and told my boyfriend to start wiping the windows so I could see, and I just started driving away. We could feel that there was something sinister about the whole situation. For one reason or another, they were trying to get us to open a door or a window. When that didn't work, they didn't respond because they didn't have a good reason made up yet. So after a couple of attempts to get us to open the door, they gave us the sob story, hoping we would get out of the car so that they could either steal the car while we were trying to help them, get to my boyfriend, or they were just going to rob us for the laptop, which I am sure they could hear and see the glow of the screen. The possibilities are unsettling and endless. Or maybe he was just a guy who happened to need a jump at 1 a.m., nowhere near any stores or houses, and I'm the asshole that left some poor guy down there just on the side of the road, right? Well, we drove to McDonald's to eat something and parked in the back driveway of someone we knew so that we weren't right out in the open anymore. The lock on our trunk recently broke and is held together only with a bungee cord, and most of our belongings are inside. so it worries me that it would make us an easier target for thieves. The next morning, we were down there again, and the white car with black rims was still there. Only now, the back window was busted out, and the man was nowhere in sight. I think it never was his car to begin with. I think all of those people came in the van, and one of them drove off, so that the rest of them could rob someone outright, or they would break into the parked cars on the side of the street when no one was in them. It was really stressful, and my boyfriend had been rattled for days. We are now nervous to park in the same spot, so we are now looking to rent a residential driveway to park at night so we are not so vulnerable. My boyfriend teased the dog for not barking, but I think it was very intuition of him because we needed to pretend we weren't inside of the car. We would have been able to do so. Maybe it would have scared them right off. I like knowing he will wait and watch me to know what to do in stressful situations. I am just so relieved that I am not down there by myself. Even the two of us together were pretty nervous, knowing that we were likely outnumbered. But if it were just a 120-pound female like myself in the car alone, I am worried they may have been a bit more aggressive about getting the door opened. Sometimes I think I watch too many murder investigation shows and conspiracy theory videos, and that may make me paranoid. Maybe it's the fact that my grandfather was a crimes and homicide detective for 30 years in the same area, and I grew up with him constantly warning me of the dangers that lurk in the dark and what can happen to a person. He taught me that real monsters are not boogeymen. They are just plain humans. My wife and I live in a somewhat medium-quality apartment complex in a fairly well-off city. It's a gated complex, and we pay extra for security, so we thought it'd be fairly safe and secure. A lot of our neighbors sleep with the windows open as well. My wife also used to like to sleep with the window open, or would occasionally leave the back door open early in the morning so that the dogs would go in and out as they wished. Our back door is open to a small private porch area with a cement slab and some low greens and gardens surrounded by a short wall. I used to keep my collapsible bike back there, folded up and locked up. Nobody would even see it unless they were already on our porch, and I kept it locked to a support pillar besides. A few months ago, this bike went missing. The dogs went crazy one night, and we couldn't figure out why. One moment, we were all sound asleep. The next moment, the dogs would not calm down. I didn't take my bike to work that day, but we noticed it was gone the next morning. We went through the necessary channels. It was an expensive bike, costing upwards of $1,000. We filed a police report, filled a claim with insurance, and notified our apartment managers. This is when we find out that although there is technically video surveillance as part of our security package, it only covers the front of the complex, not the central green where our back porch is. Since my bike was collapsible, it would be impossible to say whether somebody had it or not if they were leaving. We were hyperventilating for a couple of months after that. We have good rental insurance, so I got compensated for the loss fairly quickly. While we never really forgot, it didn't seem as important anymore as nothing more was happening. Our dogs weren't even waking us up in the night to be let out. Until just a couple weeks ago, they did. My wife, being tired and not thinking much about it, got up and just opened the door for them so that they would go in and go out as they wished. She then went back to sleep. This was around 4 a.m. Thankfully, nothing happened. The very next night, though, she wakes up around 4:30 to use the restroom. On the way back, she notices an odd silhouette between the vertical blinds of our back door. As she looks closer, she realizes she sees a man standing right on our back doorstep, as if trying to peer through the blinds. She doesn't get a good look at him, but immediately rushes to wake me up, which I do with a startled shout. When she told me what happened, I immediately grabbed a detachable bedpost and go to take a look. But though I'm trying to be quiet at that point, there doesn't seem to be anyone out there. We discussed briefly whether she was just jumping at shadows, but I did wake up somewhat loudly, and my bike had been stolen a few months ago. We decided to walk to our apartment managers in the morning and go back to bed. The next morning, I go out to the porch again just to make sure nothing else was missing and that everything was undamaged. And I find that all our greenery next to the wall had been trampled flat. There was definitely somebody back there that night. I was speaking with our apartment security. They said they can't do anything without a description. Unfortunately, my wife didn't see the guy very clearly. Apartment management just reiterates how they only have surveillance on the front of the complex. We didn't even bother making a police report. It doesn't seem like there's even anything to report. I don't know what I would have done if he was still there when I got out of the porch. Yell at him, maybe? For some reasons, our dog didn't even wake up during all of this. In any case, creepy man who was on my back porch, please don't come back. I'd rather not meet.
I was in 7th grade. It was during winter that all this happened. My two friends Kyle and Paul and I used to meet up and walk to school every morning, and we would walk home together every afternoon. We always took the same route. School was about a 15-minute walk from our meetup spot. One afternoon, we're all walking home, but that day we had another friend with us, Sam. I did not like this kid. He would always do really crappy stuff, and he was a little prick. So we're all walking home, and Sam is making snowballs. He's throwing them at buses and stop signs. Sam grabs one last snowball and throws it at a car. All of a sudden, from the back seat of that car, we see an older man sit up in the back seat. He rose up like Dracula awaking from a coffin. The old dude gets out of the car and walks towards us. He tilts his head to the side, looks at us with a smile, and says, "Thank you." And then that's when the camera came out of his pocket. He began walking around us and taking pictures. We were holding our hands to our faces, but he would swat our hands away and snap pictures, all with this f***ed up smile on his face. My buddy Kyle was a big kid for his age. He jumped at the old guy, but gets knocked to the ground with a punch. The old man just leans over Kyle while he is on the ground and starts snapping pictures. Kyle gets up, and we all start running. The guy runs to his car while yelling, "I'm gonna find out where y'all live." We cut through a park, and we reach the end of the park. He pulls up in front of us. We run back the other direction, and he caught up with us in his car again. So we faked running one direction and cut through some backyards which led to my street. We got away from him. Kyle's older brother drove us to school for the next week. One day, he was unable to drive me home, and I had to walk. Paul didn't come to school. I was alone. I thought enough time had passed, and I was safe. I made it all the way to my street. I was about 5 houses away from home when a car slowly creeped up beside me. I didn't even hear it behind me. I looked up, and it's this creepy old fuck again, smiling at me. I told you I would find out where you lived." He licked his teeth. I did the first thing that popped into my mind. I just looked at him and sat on the snowy curb. I said, "Go ahead, try to find out which one is my house. I can sit here all night." I quickly added, "Oh, and the guy that lives in the house behind me is a fucking cop," which was a total lie. He stared at me for a couple minutes and slowly drove away. I watched him turn the corner and he was gone. I sat in the snow for a good hour. Eventually I went home and called the cops. They found the guy because I knew the plate numbers. Turns out he lives right on our path to school. Never saw him again though, and I don't know what he did with all those pictures he took of us. Creepy old guy who followed me home? Let's not meet again. So a bit of my backstory. I'm as now 21, and this still chills me to this day. This dude's name was Adam, and he was something else. My cousin Sam was hanging out with this guy Adam in high school. My aunt would babysit me when I was about 9 or 10, so he would come around every now and then. Even at that age, that Adam gave me a creepy feeling. I wouldn't want to be alone in a room with him, and I assume my cousins just thought I was shy. Sam's younger sister, Jess, really liked this guy and wanted Sam to date him. Right away I was worried for my cousin. This guy made my stomach churn. He would always insist I sit in his lap and would try to get close to me for my comfort. At one point he tried to let me play with his pocket knife, which my cousin would tell him to knock it off, and he would put it away. I'd like to point out Sam would go on a walk with me and meet up with him at the high school, or the park, so my aunt knew nothing of this. Adam was so thin and tall, with dark hair, and what I would recognize when I got older as meth mouth. My cousin was the opposite, a tall blonde bombshell with bright blue eyes. He at one point tried to get my cousin to run away with him, which I told her was a bad idea, but being a kid, I was ignored. As a kid, what I didn't know is my cousin was stuck romance-wise between this creepy guy and a guy named Derek. She and Derek were messing around while Sam was keeping Adam at an emotional distance. When Adam figured that out, he snapped. He yelled at her and called her a cheater. I remember because seeing my teenage cousin in tears and a crazy dude way bigger than me screaming and carrying on scared the crap out of me. My cousin had enough and we headed for home. A few years passed and my cousin Sam and Derek got pregnant and got married soon after. I casually bring up what happened to Adam when Sam was out of the room and Jess's face kind of goes pale. She told me that night Adam, out of what I'm guessing was anger, shot and killed his roommate. He loaded a shotgun, found his roommate watching TV, and shot him point blank after he complained about his parking about an hour after his explosion on Sam. We found out later that he kept his shotgun loaded and in his car. The one he drove to the park and to the school when he met my cousin. This is the story of how my cousin dated a killer, and just how close we were being targets had we stayed longer. Super creepy friend-zoned killer? Let's not meet again. To give a small amount of background, I'm a 19-year-old female, 4'11", and 125 pounds. Not exactly the most intimidating girl out there. I live in a small city in a somewhat rural province of Canada. This happened a few weeks ago, and I debated posting it due to the discouragement of my father, who happens to be a police officer. The case is no longer deemed active, therefore I thought I'd share it. This roughly screwed me up, and I'm almost positive I won't be able to stay alone for at least a few years. Anyways, I had been planning on meeting my friend at her place where she lived alone in a small apartment building. I think it's important to notice that she is very pretty, with blonde hair, blue-eyed, fairly small girl. I had told her I would swing by after my exam at our local university and expected to be done around 8 p.m. Anyways, I ended up finishing early and headed to the apartment. I texted her and let her know, to which she responded that she was at her boyfriend's and would be home late, and I could let myself in with my key. After arriving, I swept the floor and watched some TV, and I had a glass of wine, or 3. Her apartment is closest to the outside door, and those doors are paper thin, so you could hear whatever or whenever someone entered the building. This also makes it pretty secluded. About 30 minutes later, I'd heard her voice and a man greeting her at the door. Because of this, my spidey senses were immediately tingling. She told me about this potential creeper in her building, and how she always thought he would end her one day. Haha, right? Not so much. Anyways, this guy is asking her about her day, and I start to relax, thinking he had just made me paranoid. Then I heard this guy ask my friend if she's home alone. Like, what the heck? At this point, I knew I was about to go mama bear. I start to get up, and I hear a muffled scream and some thrashing. I shit you not, I felt like I was in a freaking Twilight Zone, and all I could remember was my dad saying in his most police officer tone, "Go for the eyes. Go for the eyes." I took my keys between my fingers, and with no time to text or call anyone, went out the door, and this freaking guy had his hand around my friend's mouth and waist, and was pushing her towards her apartment door. I swear I put my key so far into this guy's eye, I seriously think I blinded the creepy neighbor. He dropped her instantly, and ran for the door. She was obviously very shaken up, and at this point, multiple neighbors were coming out wondering what the heck was happening. I ended up calling my dad, and he investigated. Creepy neighbor never came back, as far as I know. Had used a fake name for the lease. The most screwed up part of the whole thing was creepy neighbor had pictures of my friend, myself, and her old roommate plastered all over his damn apartment, and the only thing in there was a dirty mattress that this weirdo was sleeping on. Also in the wonderful apartment of horrors was some rope and a scalpel. Apparently it's inactive as of now, because this guy is probably long gone and possibly blind now.
So creepy neighbor who possibly only has one eye? Let's not meet.
This happened to me in school. Our school is rather small, where everybody knows everyone, so gossip also spreads around fast. There is this one boy who is the main focus of the gossip. For privacy's sake, I will name him Tarmo for this story. Tarmo is the loner of the school. He never talks with anybody and keeps to himself. There are so many rumors going around him. For example, that he is beaten at home, and that's why he always wears hoodies and long-sleeve shirts, even at summer. Another one was that he had a habit of following girls around and trying to force himself on them. I really didn't believe that. I thought that it was just another stupid rumor to make people hate him. He just seemed like a loner boy, and not some pervert. One day I was talking with my friends in the hallway, just talking about random things, until I felt eyes burning into my back. I turned around and saw Tarmo looking at me with his usual emotionless face. And instead of glaring at him or quickly turning away, I smiled at him, gave him a small wave. I saw a look of surprise spread over his face before I turned back to talking with my friends. They asked me why I did that, and I answered that I just wanted to make him feel more happy. They left it at that, and we went back to talking about our things. From that day, I could see him staring at me more, and at first I didn't mind it. I thought that he just thought he had finally gotten himself a friend, which I wouldn't mind being, but it soon turned weird. When we walked past each other, his hand usually landed on my butt. At first I thought it was an accident, but after the third time, I understood what he was doing it on purpose. When I went to the bathroom and then came out, he was waiting for me when I came out. That really had started to creep me out. I tried to stay with my friends for as long as I could, and I succeeded. He didn't have a chance to come close to me or do anything to me. I felt like I was free of the troubles included with him. Well, that was until it happened. I was walking to my home from my best friend's house. I always spent a lot of time at her house. I always left late from her house, since we always had so much to talk about, like best friends do. So I was walking home, listening to my music, until I felt eyes on my back. I turned around, and there in the distance he was, grinning at me and fastening his steps. I didn't know what he wanted, but that look in his blue eyes made me feel extremely uncomfortable. I broke into a run, and so did he. He was gaining on me fast, and so I did the only thing my panicked mind could think of. I started to scream as loudly as I could for help, for anybody to help me, and I saw a nearby house, lights turned on, and a middle-aged man step out of it. It seemed like Tarmo quickly grew nervous, and he ran towards the opposite direction of me. I was near a panic attack as tears ran down my cheeks. The man ran towards me and quickly asked me what happened. I explained everything through my tears. He took my hand and took me to his house, where he asked me for my parents' number. I told him my parents' number while still crying. My parents quickly came and picked me up. They thanked the man, and before taking me home, my parents let me stay at home for a few days to collect myself. Before I went back to school, I told my friends about what happened, and they were enraged. I don't know if my friends did something to Tarmo, but after I told my friends about my terrifying encounter, he finally left me alone and avoided me like the plague from then on. It has now been a year, and I still think about that encounter. I wonder what he would have done to me if that man wouldn't have come out and saved me. All I can hope that I'll never have to see him again, and that this memory will eventually fade. I just want to forget him, and that dreadful encounter that could have ended very badly. So in all sincerely, let's not ever meet again, creepy classmate.
I'm a GFE escort. That stands for Girlfriend Experience. A GFE is a booking where the escorts bring more intimacy and a more genuinely easygoing feeling to the appointment. We did not have a lot in common, but I found mental health struggles and politics were something we could bond over. Last June, he booked his first appointment with me. Since then, he has seen me 14 times, in 1-hour increments. He expressed interest in seeing me outside of work, and I had declined. Over the past year, he gradually escalated in terms of offering to help me outside of work. I didn't want the help, as I didn't want to encourage the strings that would be attached to it. He also started writing me letters that he'd give me at the end of each session. He also brought a few odd gifts, but nothing that I would have wanted or asked for. A couple times this was annoying, as I then had to figure out what to do with them. I was already thinking that I might need to end our interactions due to him getting too close, but things really started going poorly when he lost his job in May. In the following weeks, he expressed to me that he thought there was a conspiracy to get him fired, as well as a conspiracy to sabotage his interviews at other companies. I also pointed out that maybe he should stop seeing me until he got another income source. At this point, I was feeling very uncomfortable being the locus of his happiness, especially if it was going to start making the rest of his life worse, which really then amplified the issue. Things came to a head when he brought a damn refrigerator to my work. As you can expect, because of the legality of my work, it's essential to be discreet and inconspicuous. Bringing a fridge to the parking lot area outside my work is the opposite of that. I told him that I wouldn't accept it, and listed off that I had no means of transporting it home or to my mother. His response was that he could drive it to my house, or we could take a road trip to take it to her. This was alarming, as I never done anything to make him think that this was something that would happen, and had specifically made sure to disabuse him of any ideas that as they came up in the past. At this point, I had to decide to ban him because he was clearly out of touch with reality and was imposing his fantasies on me in a dangerous level. Before I emailed him to end things, he also sent me an email offering me his credit card info so that I could buy the fridge online since I wouldn't take it in person. At the end of June, I sent him an email trying to gently break things off, and actually recommended that he speak to his therapist and see if his meds needed to be adjusted, since I know Effexor was caused symptoms of schizophrenia. I also suggested that he delve into how inappropriate and dangerous it was to offer his credit card info to someone he pays to pretend to care about him. I'm not sure if he followed up with you about these things at all. This is when shit hit the fan. He initially just got banned from booking with me, but as he repeatedly called, emailed, and left messages at my agency, and for me. At that point, he started trying to see other providers I work with outside of our agency to avoid our screening and get past the ban. He kept asking if any provider or client relationships ever turned into real ones, and they tried to firmly shut that down. Thankfully, those providers also told me what had happened, and our boss sent him an email telling him to knock it off. Then he got angry and threatening during a back and forth there, and seemed to have convinced himself that my boss was preventing me from responding to him, and that it was all her fault. This was not the case, and she called him out on it, and it seemed like she got through to him. I didn't hear from him at all up until about 2 weeks ago. He showed up under a new name for an appointment with me. I'm not sure if he was waiting for a strategic opportunity, but the only reason I opened the door was because it was raining that night, and he was using his umbrella to block his face. Under any circumstances, I never would have opened to the door. Because of the rain, I stepped out to hold the door while he squeezed inside with his umbrella. So when he lowered it, I saw who he was. I stepped back, and that put me outside the door, with him blocking my way in. He kept saying he wanted to apologize in person, and that he just needed an opportunity, and then asked me not to screw it up for him with the other girls. I just kept telling him he had to leave, over and over and over again, until he finally left. He tried to hug me as I squeezed past him, but I mostly dodged it. He had taken the time to make a new identity and see outside providers so that one would give him a reference that would get him through our screening and wouldn't be flagged with any of his old banning information. This terrifies me. The next time he made a new account with us was around the time we banned him the first time. I thought he'd move on and let things go, but it turned out he literally never stopped obsessing and trying to find a way to get to me. I have felt unsafe taking on any new clients since then. This has had an incredible detrimental impact on my mental health, as well as an impact on my bottom line since I've felt unsafe taking on new clients. After he showed up, he sent me a lengthy email that further demonstrated his detachment from reality and cemented my fears even more. The next step for me may be a restraining order. I worry about how he would respond and escalate. I never thought he would stalk me for months, so clearly I can't trust he won't do something worse. Out of concern for his safety, I tried to end things gently, but at this point, it may need to be reinforced that I want nothing to do with him and never have. I would never and will never want to spend time without being paid, and not even that anymore. I do not like him sexually, and it is my skill at my job that allowed me to find small common ground with him, not any true connection or friendship. I'm trying to get in contact with a psychiatrist, so that maybe he can intervene medicine before I get the law involved. Until then, please, fridge guy, let's not meet again.
So, about 10 minutes ago, I was jogging through my neighborhood that I just moved to. I have not experienced anything weird, but we just moved here in the fall. It's now springtime, and I guess the freaks are out. While jogging, up ahead of me, I see a car that pulled into a driveway, but not all the way. In our neighborhood, the driveways are long, and the sidewalks are set a bit away from the road, so they cut partway through the yards and driveways. He is idling between the sidewalk and the road. As I'm getting closer to this car, the windows roll down, and a man's eyes are on me. I could practically sense the slobber. I think, ew, but whatever, weirdo. I pass him up as I'm heading towards the next road. I notice the same car pass me and slow way down. I don't have time for this crap. Luckily, I have headphones in, and I am moving at a quick pace. No time for stopping. Sorry, dude. I pass him, hoping he just gives up. He drives past me, but super slow this time. I ignored him. He drove ahead, and now I'm starting to freak out a little bit, thinking, what if this guy does this the whole time? I round a soft corner, and who's at the end of the street but this jerk had stopped and waited. Coincidentally, I am on a street with the house on it that has a backyard parallel with mine. I decided to cut through the backyard of this house and quickly get home. When I got home, I locked all the doors and am currently camped out at a window for signs of the creeper. How lucky I am that I was where I was when this occurred. He could have followed me home, but I don't think he did because I don't see him. But I'm still keeping watch for him. So weirdo that followed me while jogging, let's not meet again. I had been working at a fried chicken restaurant for about a year. During that time, an older coworker, who I'll refer to as CC, also known as Chicken Creeper, would get very friendly with me. I believe this man was in the mid-30s at the time, about 5'8", and of Latino descent. He was actually a shift leader, so would be in charge of me during shifts. I relatively thought he was a nice guy at first, until he started getting too chummy with me. It would start out completely innocent. He'd make friendly conversation with me about various topics, and I would do the same. I actually liked working with him in the beginning. He was easy to talk to, and wouldn't berate me if I made a few mistakes while working. I would also vent to him about annoying customers that I had to serve. Well, after he had gotten comfortable with me, he would get touchy as well. He would poke my sides sometimes, and my stomach. I don't particularly like older men touching me like that, especially if he's my supervisor at work. Almost everyone at my workplace, though, would act very close with one another, so I assumed it meant nothing, despite my discomfort. He would often poke me when no one else was around, which should have alerted me on to how creepy his actions were. He would later make comments of how pretty I was, and would ask questions about my boyfriend. Simple questions like, do you live together? Are you going to get married soon? How old is he? And stuff like that. There was this one night, I came in to pick my check up from work. It was my day off, and I was wearing makeup and a short, spaghetti-strap dress. One of my shift leaders greeted me and went to get my check. Cece was also working and came out to say hi to me. He noticed my outfit and said I looked sexy. Ew. I'd rather not have my supervisor refer to me as sexy. Please. I just smiled and chuckled awkwardly, got my check, and left. There would be other times when I was working that he got close to me and would stroke my face with his hand. I shivered and found an excuse to walk away. At this time, I was wondering if I should say something to my manager. There were cameras at my workplace everywhere, so maybe some of his creepy antics were caught on video. I decided against it though, and would confide in my friends about it instead. They also found Cece's actions pretty creepy, and said I should tell my boyfriend about it. I didn't feel I had to though, because I didn't think that Cece had done that much harm. I also really hate conflict, and thought that my boyfriend would try to convince me to tell my manager. A few weeks before I decided to leave the fried chicken place, Cece did something I found to be very inappropriate. I was working that day, and had just ended my shift. We were allowed to have drinks from the soda dispenser machine using the restaurant's to-go cups as long as we kept them in the walk-in freezer in the back. I had gotten a drink that day, and walked to the back to finish it up, and throw away my cup. Because I hate when people leave their cups there for others to throw away. Little did I know, though, that Cece was in there as well. I had started to avoid being alone in secluded parts of the restaurant with him, because that's usually when he would try to touch me. I was startled when I saw him, because I didn't see him walk in beforehand. He asked me if I was leaving for the day, and I told him yes, I am. He asked, why? Why can't you stay longer? He would often ask me this when I was done working for the day, and I'd always say, because I'm tired, and I want to go home and sleep. He would usually just say, okay, bye. But this time, he did say something different. This time, he walked over to me and kissed me on the forehead. This disturbed me, but me being so non-confrontational, I just smirked, grabbed the cup, and hurried away. I told a couple friends about this, and they got upset for me, and found Cece pretty revolting for doing this. They again told me to tell my boyfriend, but I didn't want to upset him, and kept it to myself. I eventually told him about it a year later, and he was shocked and upset that I did not tell him about it while it was happening. I told him I did not want to tell him because I thought he might try to confront Cece or my manager about it. I feel the saddest part about this was he actually was married with children, and that she worked alongside us as well. His wife was also a shift leader, and I always found her pleasant to work with. I honestly didn't even know Cece was married, let alone that she was a nearby worker with all of us at this time. I was so surprised when she told me while we were working together. She had mentioned she had a husband, and I asked her how long they were together for. She said 15 years, I believe, and that they have been working together in the same chicken place all this time. Astonished, I then asked her who her husband was, and she replied that it was Cece. I commented, "Really?" And she said, "Yeah. How did you not know that?" I said that I didn't really ask people those questions, because I don't like prying in people's personal lives until they were okay with it. She then stated how she had 3 kids as well. I felt so guilty about it, wondering if I should tell her about her husband's flirtatious, wretched ways. I decided against it though, feeling it might strain their marriage, and fearing she might not believe me anyway. To my Kentucky Fried Creeper, I hope we do not work together ever again.
The story I'm about to tell happened because I guess I am too nice to people. When I was 17, I was a pretty blonde girl who was very nerdy. I would often get guys who wanted to be more than friends when they found out I liked games and films, but they always just made their crushes known, and I would gently let them down. I had a high school boyfriend at the time. I worked at a movie theater in the Midwest. I loved this job, and became good friends with the people I worked with. It was the perfect job for a teen who loved movies and needed to work after school. That was until I met Simon. Simon was a guy who worked at the theater with me. He seemed nice enough. A little geeky and not very attractive, but kind of just a regular guy, and I was friendly as I always was. He was almost 10 years older than me, so I wasn't too worried about him thinking I wanted to be more than friends. As time went on, he gave me more and more attention, talking to me for hours during the downtime when movies were playing. I suspected he might like me, but I wasn't too worried as he was a manager, and I wasn't, and dating between managers and staff was not allowed. So I thought he would just keep it to himself. Then after a year, I was asked to move to another theater as the one I worked at would be shutting down in a few months. I agreed, but was the only staff member to be offered this option. I realize now that this is not as fruitless as I thought it would be. Just a week after I started at the new movie theater, Simon showed up to say hi. I was friendly as always and was nice to him. After all, we were the same movie chain, so he could come here to watch movies for free if he wanted to. I thought it was innocent, but soon started to feel uncomfortable when all of the time Simon was spending hanging out at the movie theater. I asked my coworkers if he came in when I wasn't there, but they said no. Then it dawned on me that we no longer worked at the same movie theater, so he was free to pursue me romantically without worrying about his job. This made me worried as he started, not awkwardly, flirting with me. I found out later that a girl at my job who didn't like me had Simon a copy of my schedule for the next 2 months. So I started to hide. Every time I saw him, I would make some excuse to go and hide in the stockroom or the projection booth. It was starting to make me very uneasy. My boss, who is still a great friend to me, noticed how uncomfortable I was, and told me if I wanted to, I could report it to the home office and get him to stop. I thought this was taking it too far, and I declined, thinking eventually he would give up. Well, he didn't. He came in close to my birthday and dropped off a card and a CD with lots of rather creepy music on it. I had finally had enough and told my boss to report him. The management told him he wasn't allowed to come to my theater again, or he would be fired. I didn't see him for a few months. Thought it was over, but then I had people I worked with at the old theater who went to the high school with me coming up to me in the halls and cussing me out for getting Simon in trouble. They said I had led him on and that he was a lonely guy who had a crush on, and it was cruel, and that I got him in trouble or that I wouldn't give him a chance. I was horrified that he had been spreading these rumors to people I thought were my friends, and now were attacking me at school. I spent the next few months afraid to go anywhere. I lived in a small town and was terrified of going out in case I ran into him. I am a genuinely nervous person who scares easily, so my parents thought I was overreacting. My boss told me not to worry, and that Simon probably had given up on me. Oh, how I wish that had been true. The day the old theater closed down, I was at work. I had to work late, and me and my boss were the last ones to leave for the night. My boss, Peter, asked me to wait for him so he could pick the lock up together. It was about 2 a.m. once we left. The door had been locked since 10 p.m. so no customers could get in. As we walked out, my boss, who had kind of a sick sense of humor, was joking about Simon and his crush on me, probably trying to make light of it to cheer me up. When we stepped outside, I turned to lock the door, and my boss shouts, "There he is!" I thought he was joking again, and turned to tell him that it wasn't funny. But he wasn't joking. Simon was standing there, with Peter just between us. I froze. My entire body went rigid, and I didn't know what to do. I heard Simon say my name, and saw him try to get around my boss, but Peter spread his arms out and blocked him from me. I saw that he had to get his eyes fixed on me. Peter told Simon to get out of here, and that I didn't want to see him. I struggled to unlock the door, which was notoriously sticky to get open. I could hear Simon trying to get my attention, but I just focused on the lock. Finally it gave way and I rushed inside, running for the office, which had a deadbolt security door. I unlocked it and sat inside hyperventilating. Peter came in and shut the door, checking in if I was okay. He told me he told Simon to go home and to not come back or he would call the cops. We sat in the office and waited for what seemed like forever. Peter then said he would go and check to make sure he had left, and I stayed in the locked office. A few minutes go by, and I hear Peter's voice telling me that he was coming back in. When he opened the door, he looked furious and headed straight for the phone. I asked what was wrong, and he said that Simon was still out there. Apparently he had parked in the shadow of the theater where it was hard to see. He parked in such a way that he would have to had walked past him to get to my car. He had parked his van, a van I didn't know he had in the shadows. Peter had found him crouched down beside the van, as if waiting for something, waiting for me to walk by. Peter had shouted he was calling the cops and ran back inside. By the time the cops showed up, he had left. They took a statement, and Peter gave them all of Simon's contact information, as it was still in the system. We guessed he showed up today because he was no longer at risk of losing his job, as the theater had closed down. I never saw Simon again, but it didn't mean I wasn't terrified. I spent the whole year up until I moved away, terrified I might run into him again. I never did, but it ruined what should have been a great summer before I left for college. I hate to think of what would have happened if my boss hadn't been there that night, or hadn't been smart enough to check that Simon had left. I am still good friends with Peter. He even came to my wedding. I owe him an unknown debt. And to Simon, wherever you are, let's not meet again. When this happened, I was 19 in London. My then boyfriend had called me a cab to go home from his place, which is about a 30-minute drive. His car was in the shop at the time. Before I got in the cab, he kissed me and told me to text him when I got home, in earshot of the driver. I get in, and the man starts a friendly conversation about what I'm studying. Nothing unusual, but the conversation gets a bit personal when he tells me he's from Pakistan and a Muslim. He then asks me if I am too. I'm Iranian, and my family is Muslim, but I don't practice. But I just said yes to not cause any awkwardness. He started to tell me I look like a good Muslim girl, and that he wanted to marry someone like me. I became increasingly uncomfortable, and noticed he deliberately turned on a street that would make me ride another 15 minutes longer than usual. I text my boyfriend saying the taxi driver is creepy, and he replies telling me to keep texting him until I get home so he knows I'm okay. The cab driver asked if that guy that said goodbye to me was my boyfriend, and I immediately said yes, hoping that would shut him up. He asked if we're serious, and I said yes, and he continues saying he wants someone exactly like me. He then locks the car doors. I ask him why he did that, and he says for safety. I swear my mouth was so dry I could hardly swallow. I was pretty scared, but I didn't say anything because he was still going towards my house, and I didn't want to make him angry. He asked me the most disgusting questions. If I was still a virgin, if I'd ever done stuff with my man. I refused to answer and kept frantically texting my boyfriend, but the douche had either left his phone somewhere or fallen asleep. So much for being worried for my safety. When we finally get there, he overcharged me, told me he had my number, and that he was going to call me so we could meet. I thought I won't because I'm in a relationship, and my family wouldn't like it. He said I can keep it a secret. I tried to open the door to get out, but it was still locked, and he laughed. He then stared at me intensely through the rearview mirror for what felt like a full minute. My stomach felt hollow, and the street was quiet and dark, which made it feel even more creepy. He finally unlocked the doors, and I booked it to the front door, and frantically knocked as I looked for my key. My mom asked why I looked so pale, and I told her. She proceeded to call the cab company to make a complaint, and they admitted that he'd done this before, and promised they would fire him, and reported it to the police. But they didn't pursue it since he hadn't harmed me. Mr. Cab Driver, I hope we never meet again, and no, I won't marry you.
I worked in your run-of-the-mill sub shop in high school. It was on a secluded stretch of road in the in-between part of town. We didn't close till late at night, and I was often there alone as the closer. Not long into my time there, I got a phone call one night that made my blood run cold. It was about 30 minutes away from close, and I was eager to get off. I started to close down half the bread case, wipe up cutting the board, degrease ovens, that kind of thing. I was elbow deep in the dishwasher when I heard the phone ring. I rolled my eyes. Great. I clean everything, and someone's going to call in 8 minutes before we close. I rush up the front and answer with our name in a forced but friendly "How can I help you" tone. There was a pause, so I waited. "Can I help you?" I said, with an even more forced smile. Are you there, alone?" a man's voice said. "No," I stammered immediately.
"Who's there with you?" he said, with a not-so-forced smile in his voice. I began to panic. I was new. I only knew one of my coworkers' names for sure. "Ed. Ed's here." "No," the voice said abruptly. "Ed isn't there." I couldn't speak. I couldn't think of anything to say, and the silence was roaring in my ears. "Will you make my sandwich? Just for me? I want you to make it, and only you." I hung up. Under no circumstances were we to close early without permission, but I wasn't about to go for some damn subs. I grabbed a knife and rushed to the doors and locked everything up. I called my mom because, of course, I called my mom. I told her what happened and asked her to come sit in the parking lot in case anyone decided to pay me a visit. She did, and I closed without incident. I just wonder, who called me? Could they see me? Was it Ed himself? I don't really know, and I hope that I never find out. This happened several years ago when I was at university. I had a good group of male friends that I used to go on nights out with. They were all like older brothers, and they were very protective of me. Even more so, my boyfriend at the time was a part of that group. I guess that made me feel a little too safe, as I had a tendency to just wander away from the group when I got drunk. I wouldn't go far, but I'd just dance around and drift away. My boyfriend usually steered me back as he knew what I was like. Anyway, that weekend, my boyfriend had gone home to visit his family, so it was just me and a few guys out that night. I was wearing this high-waisted skirt that zipped in the back. We were on the dance floor, and as usual, the boys were mucking about. I think they were talking about something I had no interest in, so I drifted off to dance by myself. Abruptly, out of nowhere, I felt hands on me. Now, this isn't really anything new. Unfortunately, being female, getting groped on a night out is fairly normal. I feel like being quite petite as well makes me look like an easy target because I don't look like I'd fight back. I squirmed out of the person's grip and continued to dance, deciding it's just time to ignore them. But then, next thing I know, this dude had completely unzipped my skirt from top to bottom, and when I turned around, obviously furious, he tried to grab me. I was so angry that I just started screaming at him, and then tried to punch him. He dodged me, and that's when my guy friends found me, and his friends found him. His friends immediately started grabbing him and started to apologize on his behalf, while my friends were trying to calm me down. I was so angry, though, that I didn't want to let it go. This guy had just unzipped my skirt and tried to assault me. How am I supposed to be calm about this? Honestly, I think I really would have tackled that guy if my boyfriend's best friend hadn't come up at that moment and realized what had happened, because instead of focusing on my anger, I now had to spend the next few minutes trying to calm my boyfriend's best friend down so he didn't try to start a fight. At that point, a bouncer had arrived to see what was happening. I didn't want my friend to get in trouble, so I just pulled them all away and decided to forget about it. I really wish I had reported that guy, but I was young, drunk, and just wanted to go home. Anyway, creepy dickhead, let's never meet again. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe, like, and hit the bell for notifications on future videos, and become a stalker of the night, and I'll see you next time.